Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at the 2026 governor elections. So taking a quick look here, there are 36 states that will have governor elections in 2026, of which 18 are currently held by Republicans and 18 are currently held by Democrats. And as we can see here, there are a lot of incumbents that are either not running for re-election or they are term limited. So there are a lot of open seats. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to take a look first at the safe blue states. We have the state of California, where there is a jungle primary, meaning that all of the Democrats and all of the Republicans run in one primary and the top two candidates advance to the general election. At first, polling showed that it was possible for two Republican candidates to advance and completely lock out the Democrats, but since then, the Democrats have begun to consolidate amongst three main candidates: Eric Swalwell, Tom Steyer, and Katie Porter. Currently, it seems most likely that Swalwell and Hilton will advance to the general election, and if it's a Democrat versus Republican in the general election, California will be safely Democratic. Going to the state of Colorado, this is another safe blue state for the Democrats. Senator Michael Bennet should cruise to a win, as Colorado has been trending left relative to the nation. And in New Mexico, former Congresswoman and Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland should win fairly easily, as Latinos have swung heavily towards Democrats in the past year or so. And then in the state of Minnesota, Senator Amy Klobuchar is running for governor. I expect her to win very easily. In 2024, she was reelected to the U.S. Senate by 15 percentage points, even as Kamala Harris only won Minnesota by 4 percentage points. She's very popular in Minnesota, and I expect that trend to continue. In the state of Pennsylvania, that's going to be safe for the Democratic Party as well. In 2022, Josh Shapiro was elected as governor by 15 percentage points, and Republicans have pretty much given up on beating him. They aren't putting up much of a fight in 2026, and I expect he will cruise to re-election in Pennsylvania. Now, the state of New York, I'm going to put as safe Democratic. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said New York was likely Democratic. Back in 2022, Governor Kathy Hochul won a full term by only 6 percentage points, and as a Democrat in New York, that is a very underwhelming performance. However, since 2022, she has improved her approval rating significantly, and so considering that and a much bluer national environment, I think Kathy Hochul should easily win by double digits. The state of Maryland, Illinois, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island will all be safe for the Democratic Party. Rhode Island, to have a footnote there, Governor Dan McKee is very unpopular. However, he will likely lose his primary to Helena Foulkes. If he wins his primary, however, this race is going to move to likely Democratic from safe Democratic, but I do expect the governor to lose his primary, and as a result, Rhode Island will be safe for the Democrats. Now, for the Republican Party, the safe states are going to be Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and Vermont. So in Alabama, we actually have a rematch of the 2020 U.S. Senate race where Tommy Tuberville defeated Democratic Senator Doug Jones, and now they're both running for governor. Of course, Tuberville should easily win in bright red Alabama. South Carolina, I expect to be safe for the Republican Party. However, there is a scenario where South Carolina narrows to the point where it becomes likely Republican if the Republicans nominate Nancy Mace or if the national environment shifts heavily towards the Democratic Party. Florida as well could be changed to likely Republican if the national environment shifts heavily towards Democrats, but in recent years, Florida has seen a far swing towards the Republican Party, and I don't think Florida will be very competitive in 2026 unless there is a massive blue wave, in which case it could be somewhat competitive. In the state of Vermont, Republican Governor Phil Scott has not yet said if he will run for re-election. I'm going to assume that he will, but if he doesn't, then Vermont will move from safe Republican to safe Democrat. Kamala Harris won Vermont very easily by over 30 percentage points. However, they do have a Republican governor who's fairly popular, and I believe he's the only Republican who can hold this seat for the Republican Party. So it fully depends on if he runs for re-election or not. But for now, I will assume that he will. Now, moving on to the likely blue states, we have Oregon, where Democrat Tina Kotek only won by 3.5 percentage points in 2022. I think with a bluer national environment, she will have an easier time winning re-election in 2026. However, I can't say for sure that she would win by over 10 percentage points, which is why Oregon is likely Democratic. And then the state of Maine, there is a very crowded Democratic primary field, so we don't quite yet know who the Democratic nominee will be. However, keep in mind in 2022, outgoing Governor Janet Mills won re-election by 13 percentage points. 2026 should be a bluer year, and this race could get moved to safe Democratic later on in the election cycle, but for now, it will be likely Democratic. In moving on to likely red states, we have Kansas, where Democratic Governor Laura Kelly is term limited. None of the Democratic primary candidates so far have been very impressive, although that could change. Kansas is a state that has been trending heavily towards the Democratic Party, and with a strong blue wave, it is possible if the Democrats nominate a very strong candidate that Kansas could be very competitive, but for now I'm going to put it in the likely Republican column, and this would actually be a flip for the Republican Party. Alaska is also going to be a likely Republican state. On the Democratic side, former state Senator Tom Begich, I think he's a solid candidate, and I think I could see Alaska moving to lean Republican if we get an even bluer national environment than what we have right now. But for now, Alaska is likely Republican. In Texas, that's also going to be a likely Republican state. The reason being that in 2022, a red-leaning year, Governor Greg Abbott won a third term by 11 percentage points, and 2026 will be a bluer year than 2022. And something to note is that Greg Abbott has alienated a lot of conservative voters with his pro-school choice policies, and he is running for a fourth term, which may increase voter fatigue against him. I would expect him to win by around 5 to 7 percentage points in Texas. And I did forget to mark Hawaii as safely Democratic. Sorry about that, folks. Now, moving on to the lean blue states, we have the state of Arizona, where Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs won by less than a percentage point back in 2022. In 2024, Trump did win Arizona by a whopping 5.5 percentage points, but Democrats have shown that they can win down ballot in Arizona, as Ruben Gallego won a U.S. Senate seat there by 2.5 points, outperforming Kamala Harris by 8 points on the same ballot. So Democrats can win down ballot in Arizona, and Republicans are likely to nominate Congressman Andy Biggs for governor. He's a Freedom Caucus member, and I believe he would be a controversial candidate. And with the incumbency advantage, I think Katie Hobbs is a favorite to win re-election in the state of Arizona. In Wisconsin, there is a crowded Democratic primary between former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, Sarah Godlewski, and Francesca Hong. Regardless of who is the Democratic nominee, I think they are going to be favored to win this governorship simply because of the national environment that should significantly help whoever the Democrats nominate. Now, moving on to lean Republican states, we have Nevada, where Governor Joe Lombardo is running for re-election. He narrowly defeated former Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak in 2022, and he at first did enjoy fairly strong approval ratings. However, since then, Las Vegas's economy has struggled and Latino voters have swung heavily towards the Democratic Party. For now, Nevada is a lean Republican state. for the governor's race. However, I could see this race getting moved to tilt Republican in the future, as Democrats have nominated or are likely to nominate, Attorney General Aaron Ford. I think he would be a solid candidate. New Hampshire will be lean Republican. Kelly Ayotte was elected as governor by nearly double digits in 2024. However, the national environment once again is going to be a lot bluer in 2026, and Ayotte's popularity isn't as strong as former Republican Governor Chris Sununu's was, and Sununu's strong popularity enabled him to keep winning re-election even as Democrats dominated New Hampshire at the federal level. However, I do think Ayotte is a favorite to win re-election, and this is one of those races where I could see it moving towards Republicans from lean Republican to likely Republican as we get closer to November. Now, in the tilt blue column, I have the state of Michigan. Michigan's a pretty interesting race because you really have a three-way race between Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. She is the likely Democratic nominee. And then there is an independent candidate, former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who seems to be polling a lot higher than you'd expect. He seems to be polling around 20%, which could make this race very interesting. But I do think he is taking slightly more away from the Republicans than he is from the Democrats. But regardless, this race is in a very weird position right now. So for now, I'm only going to put it as tilt Democratic, but I think the national environment should help the Democratic nominee, especially if we have a strong blue wave. And then going ahead to Georgia, Georgia could be very close to a coin flip race. I'm going to put it in the tilt Democratic column, which would actually be a flip for the Democrats. And the Democratic primary is very undecided in Georgia right now for governor. However, shifting demographics in Georgia's overall leftward trend relative to the nation is going to help whoever the Democrats nominate. Plus, you have Senator Jon Ossoff running for re-election. I think he's going to win fairly comfortably, and his coattails will help the Democratic nominee, whoever they may be. And there is no Republican incumbent governor in Georgia that's running for re-election, so it is an open seat. And the Republican primary is very much undecided as well. None of the Republican candidates have really impressed me as of right now. So I think this could very well be the year that the floodgates swing open in Georgia for the for Georgia Democrats. And then looking at the tilt red states, we have Iowa, where State Auditor Rob Sand, I think he's a very strong candidate for Democrats. He's the only statewide elected Democrat in Iowa right now. However, the Republican candidate, Randy Feenstra, he's a congressman. I don't think he's a slouch. Trump won Iowa by 13 percentage points in 2024. During the Trump years, Iowa has been shifting further to the right. However, so as a result, this is going to be a very heavy lift for the Democrats. However, Iowa is a state that has been uniquely very hurt by the tariffs under the Trump administration, as well as increase in diesel prices. So I think Democrats do have a unique opportunity in Iowa. This is tilt Republican for now. However, if we have a very strong blue wave in 2026, I could definitely see this race flipping to the Democrats. Keep an eye out for Iowa. And then in the state of Ohio, I'm going to place this as tilt Republican as well. The Democratic candidate, Amy Acton, I think she's decent, but more importantly, the likely Republican nominee, Vivek Ramaswamy, I think he's a pretty terrible candidate. I think he's really going to struggle in turning out rural voters, and having Sherrod Brown on the ballot running for U.S. Senate, as well as having a blue wave year, should help Amy Acton. For now, Ohio is going to go in the tilt Republican column, but once again, similar to Iowa, if we have a really strong blue wave, I could see Ohio's governorship flipping to the Democrats. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy is a uniquely bad candidate for the Republican Party. So ultimately, I think Kansas, as of right now, would flip to the Republicans, and Georgia would flip to the Democrats. So Democrats would continue to finish with 24 governorships and Republicans with 26, with 2 total flips. So if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, turn on post notifications so that you don't miss a future upload. And please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section, as well as any suggestions that you may have for future videos. And I will see you all in the next video.